Cool. You guys see my screen?
Yes, we do.
All right. Well, nice to see so many of you guys. I mean, this is really cool, full circle project, to present with you guys because, Eyes was really born out of the Metagov community. And so it's so cool to, come back here, see so many familiar faces. So yeah, I'm Tyler. I'm the founder of Eyes. Eyes is all about collective process. And we will talk about what that means shortly. But let's go through a little short agenda. So we'll do some slides. We'll go through a short demo, and then if we have time permitting, play together. So we'll use eyes together, vision the next phase of eyes, do a Q&A. All right, so the core premise of eyes is that cognitive overload is the central problem of online collaboration. And I guess some like initial context to really ground this. So the idea of eyes really started around, I think this must have been like 3 or 4 years ago. And I was living a double life. I was in the Metagov and DAO community. And then also I was in this kind of group of artists, activists building a nonprofit in LA. And so I was like being in like the DAO and Metagov community, people were talking about these exotic coordination mechanisms, being able to put everything on chain, this like really deep research in theory into what makes good governance. But then meanwhile, I was building this nonprofit with my artist, activist friends, and I was trying to bring some of these concepts I was learning from Metagov and just like the greater Web3 community into my group of friends. And they absolutely hated it, right? It just felt very bureaucratic. It was like a lot of administrative overload. And these were all people who were working, multiple jobs. They're really passionate about what they were doing. But it was just like, even the concept of having a proposal, saying that you're voting on someone, it seemed to really rob the joy out of what was like this really grassroots, really passionate effort and make it something feel really bureaucratic and honestly just like really difficult. And in addition, we were using things like Discord, where people are easily getting lost in like what's actually going on. And so I was realizing like not only does our concepts about governance often not really map out onto these kind of real world contexts, especially in people who are not technical or governance savvy, but I was seeing the same problems within both the Metagov community itself, right? We're often overwhelmed by all the Slack channels and things happening in our community, and really any other context. See this in a Web2 startup, in a Web3 DAO, people are overwhelmed, right? And that really kind of thwarts our best efforts at these more sophisticated governance coordination systems. And so there's a lot of reasons why that's the case, right? The reality is just like online collaboration is super messy. And it's messy for a few different reasons that are very inherent in how online collaboration works. The first is teams. So we're spread across multiple teams. They're all using different communication platforms, right? So you might be in Metagov, Slack, you might be in your company's Discord, you're being a few other Telegram channels. And we're often having to coordinate in ways that cross these organizational boundaries. So that's one layer of complexity. A second layer of complexity is that we're spread across different tools. So all of the context you need to make a decision or make sense of a situation is often sprinkled across different tools and platforms. And often you need to you need to take action collectively across multiple tools at the same time. And then finally, we're spread across time, right? So our collaboration is primarily async. We're sprinkled across the globe, and our needs are quickly changing as the situation changes. So that's all to say is that this is a lot of ways that our context is spread very, very, very thin. And it's not our fault if we think that we can't really keep up with everything. It's actually an impossible task. And there's a reason why our governance coordination mechanisms really fall flat when we put them into the real world, because you're putting them on people who are overwhelmed and unable to actually track what's going on. And that's a recipe for failure. So like it doesn't matter how well thought out your governance system is. It doesn't matter if it's on chain. If it's not usable, it doesn't really matter. People aren't going to use it. And so if you need to solve this tension problem, if you're going to have any shot and making the tools that we talked about in Metagov really a reality that impact people's lives. So the way Eyes approaches this chaos is using collective process. And so by using process, you can tie together all of this fragmentation between your tools, your teams, and time into something coherent. And the way it does that is through this process engine. This process engine is a way of both defining process, then automating it as well. So this process can tie together multiple teams that are spread across on different platforms, whether it be your Slack, your Discord, Ethereum NFTs, ties together tools. So action across different Web 2 and Web 3 tools, like Google Calendar, OpenAI, GitHub. And then time. It's a way of not just defining process, but defining how process changes over time. Okay, so what is this process and what does that look like? So every process has a common form, and this can really apply to any kind of process. And this is a really key insight of eyes is that all of regardless of whether you're deciding or coming to a shared understanding, all has a similar form. And that form is that there's a trigger, someone starts a process, and that could be from Slack or their Discord or Telegram. Then there's a response, and maybe that's a vote. It could be a free text response. Maybe it's a ranking. Maybe you're submitting a picture. And then you have a result where maybe it's a decision, an AI summary. Maybe you're generating a video with Sora, right? Maybe it's a canvas, a Miro style, right? It can really be any kind of artifact. And then finally, there's an action. You do something with that result. And so maybe that's approving a pull request in GitHub or creating an event in Google Calendar, right? So that's all to say that you can really, any of the processes that we talk about in Metagov, you can model with an eyes flow. And so it's extremely flexible. It's essentially a language for defining process, and it's very flexible. So even though it's like infinitely flexible, it's really important that on the end user experience is super, super simple, right? And that's really the core tension of eyes is like, how do you get infinite configurability so you can design any kind of process? Because there's really this long tail of needs in terms of how we coordinate it together. You have to give people a lot of flexibility, but the end user experience needs to be super, super simple. And the way that eyes works is that it's not just like another app that you need to download. It can participate natively wherever your team works. So for example, in Telegram, that's where we've first built the integration. And then you have this transparent log of both what happened in the past and then how you take action in the future. So eyes flows are evolutionary and bottoms up. They're built to change, right? So a lot of times we think about governance systems, especially in the Web3 world, and people say, oh, we do compound style governance or we do optimistic governance here, right? Where in eyes, it's like, no, you're not actually supposed to know the right governance system to begin with. That's something you iterate it into, right? And so eyes is optimized for iteration. You start off with one thing, maybe you're a benevolent dictatorship to begin with, and then you transition to a direct democracy and then a futarchy, right? Like you can change things as your needs arise. But crucially, this isn't an admin who's changing things behind the scenes and making it set up for everybody. Process is evolved through yet more collaborative process. So in eyes, there is no admin at all. That's not a concept that exists here, which makes this very different from other kinds of software. It's only collaborative process. We'll show how that works in a second here. And then finally, you can, with eyes, is essentially a way of slapping on a coordination layer onto otherwise hierarchical tools, right? So you can turn an existing Slack group or Telegram into these self-governing organisms. You can add a coordination layer onto otherwise admin control tools. Okay, so the things that we're building for right now is the first big experiment is AI sense making with the HATS protocol. And so HATS, if you guys aren't familiar, it's on-chain roles. They've actually presented here at Metagov Seminar as well. And so we're essentially using eyes as a way of replacing their governance forum. A lot of people use discourse and instead doing kind of an AI sense making lightweight governance flows through eyes. Another thing we're experimenting with is community-run social media feeds on Blue Sky. So actually having all curation of a feed entirely controlled and moderated by a community transparently through eyes. Community-run calendars, activist cross-org coordination, and finally AI agent governance. So actually changing who these agents are, what they do, the tasks they have, the prompts that they're given. We can talk about that more later as well. All right, so the vision of eyes right now, like I'm the only person building eyes, but there's a very big vision of like what this needs to become for successful. It's going to be an open source ecosystem of plugins for novel coordination mechanisms, right? So a lot of these things we talk about in Metagov, you can actually quickly prototype. You can create a GitHub repo, plug it into eyes directly, and actually test out these kind of novel ways of governing ourselves. Integrations across hundreds of Web2, Web3 tools, and then cryptographically verifiable process execution. All right, so that was a lot of words. Let's go into the demo. All right. You guys still see my screen? All right. Okay, so we're going to go through a flow today. And when we talk about process, I call that a flow within eyes. And so this one is very simple. And it's actually pretty similar to what we're going to be doing for HATS protocol. It's discussing and approving a proposal, right? Though it works a little differently from a normal forum, and we'll talk about that. So let's talk about the anatomy of this flow. Just like we talked about before, every flow has a similar structure. So this one has a trigger, and in this case, this Telegram group can trigger this flow. And you add some context to the flow when you start. You describe the proposal that you want to discuss. And then we go to the next step. And in this step, we create consensus with AI. So we're trying to come to a shared understanding together of like, hey, what do we actually all think about this? Actually, sorry, let me send out a link because I want you guys to join this Telegram group if you have Telegram. Because we can actually all participate in this together. Where's the chat? All right, so I just dropped it in the chat. So feel free to join that. And then we will, yeah, we'll be able to play around with this live. Okay, so all right, so we have a trigger. We're going to create consensus with AI.
I'm in the chat.
You didn't go through? Just send as a direct message. All right, here we go.
Got it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the anatomy of this flow. So we have this trigger. The next step, we're using AI to come to a shared understanding of like, what do we think about this proposal? And then finally, once everyone has kind of said their piece, we bring it in for a vote. I made this vote a little bit special in that we can approve it with 2 votes, but we can actually just reject it with 1, right? So it's like you get an automatic veto for just 1 vote. Anyone can veto this. All right, so let's show it in action. So here's a proposal. I think Liz will love this proposal. Make Metagov a DAO. And so it's like put all Metagov operations on chain. All right, Liz, let's see what you think about this one. All right, so we're gonna trigger it. Okay, cool. So I've triggered it, and if you guys were following along the Telegram, you'll see that let me share my screen here. Okay, so in the Telegram, we've triggered this flow, and we could respond directly in our in eyes in the app. But the idea of eyes is that you never have to do that. Like you never have to actually go into eyes. You can participate wherever you're most comfortable. So let's reply. So reply to this and add some of your thoughts about what you think. Should we make Metagov a DAO, right? So click that reply button there and then just add your thoughts. So yes. It doesn't need to be super well thought out, just like add a couple words. And just make sure to reply directly to that message as well, so I can register it. So Val, I think yours would be registered out there. Cool. Cool. That is a Senti, that is a fair point. All right, Liz, you heard it here first, everybody. Making Metagov DAO. All right. So I've configured this step so I can end it early and just for the sake of this demo. And so I'm gonna end it. And so, okay, so we have a summary of kind of what we all think about this, right? Which is that it's a mix of opinions, supporters that align with values of transparency and censorship resistance. There's a concern about exclusion, restricting operations. Okay, so now we can vote directly in the channel. So what do you guys think? Add your vote. Remember, it's 2 votes to approve, 1 vote to veto. So, oh man, okay, so someone vetoed it. So it's not happening. We were not making Metagov a DAO. I'm so sorry, Liz. I know you were really excited about that. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to. Okay, so if we go back to this proposal, basically everything that happened here is in this flow, right? So I triggered it. We created consensus with AI. So here's our summary. And then finally, we have this final vote where we said no, right? So this whole process, which is like a fairly complicated process, as automated, but also made legible um, through this. And we have all of our responses here as well. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the Telegram. Okay, so it's one thing to, oh, I'm sorry, Seth, you didn't get to vote. It's okay, we'll reopen the proposal. Okay, so we'll start a new flow here. And what's interesting about eyes is that you can participate in eyes directly from Telegram, but you can also initiate processes directly within the Telegram as well. So we're gonna co-create a poll. Oh, sorry. Oopsies. Forgot to co-create a poll, and what we're gonna do it on where should we have the next Metagov conference or the first Metagov conference? I don't know if we've ever had one.
We've never had our own. I like that
We never
question.
had our own. Yeah, we have things like DWeb, but I don't know if that's all right. Where should we have Metagov Con? Cool. Okay, so right now, instead of someone just making a ballot for us and saying what to vote on, we're actually going to make the ballot together, and then we're going to vote on it together. And we're all going to do this through Telegram. So, all right, so everybody reply with this with like whatever city you think we should hold this in. All right, unless somebody has any final. Whoa. I mean, yeah, for sure. I like that though. Okay, unless anyone has any final thoughts, I'm gonna end this step early. Okay, so what you see it did here is it actually summarized this and cleaned all of our responses up with AI. Um, and then it created the poll. So add your votes. The other second to add your votes. Okay, cool. I'm gonna end this one early. Looks like we have a winner. Cool. So we're gonna do our next MetaGov conference virtually. And maybe we could throw eyes in there as well as like a little that aligns. Okay, so just to reiterate what just happened here is we created on a kind of sophisticated flow just on the fly within Telegram. So we collected everyone's ideas and we voted on a final solution. So let's go back into eyes. And so here again, we've created this flow, which was we got all of these ideas and AI cleaned them up and kind of deduplicated them for us, and then created a poll and we decided virtual. Okay, so this is like the general idea of these flows, and I hope you can kind of get a sense of that these things can be where's back to oh yeah. So so just to say that these can be pretty diverse in like how you think about like what these things actually do, right? So what's important about eyes is that we created like these different kinds of flows, but we actually have like a home for them, right? So we have this demo group which can actually fully manage and own all these flows. So we can see everything that we've done so far today, all this activity is completely searchable within our group. And we have also all of our, with all of the, the final results. And then we also have all of the flows that belong to this group, right? So discuss and approve a proposal, including flows to change the group itself. So remember I said earlier that in eyes, there are only flows. It's only process. There is no concept of an admin. So for example, if we wanted to change this group, evolving the demo group, that itself is a flow, right? And so this flow works a little bit differently. It's just a trigger and you evolve the group. And so trigger this flow. And so instead of just being a Telegram group, it can also be, for example, the D20 governance Discord group, right? And so we can change the permissions of so add D20 to Metagov group. And so we've done this through a flow. If we go back to the group, we've added D20 to our group. Okay, I'm realizing now that there's one very big topic we haven't discussed yet. And that's about this language of the flows and how you change the flows themselves. So let's go into discuss and approve proposal. This is the first flow we did. And so we have this flow and it's pretty simple. And we might say, hey, we actually want to make some changes to this. And maybe, for example, we want to add another group on this, or we want to change the voting threshold or the voting mechanism. How do we actually do that? And so what we can do is we use the evolve flow. And so you notice here that we have this flow template, which is just the flow we all did earlier, which is creating the proposal and voting on it. But we also have the flow that changes the flow. And that it also has a trigger. You approve to vote. If there's a yes, we evolve the flow. And so let's go through this and let's evolve the flow together. And so now we're in the config of this flow, right? And remember, eyes is a language for a process. And so every aspect about how this flow works, we can change, right? So we can change the trigger, we can change who can actually participate on this. And so we could say, no, yeah, like we did earlier, let's add sense D20 Discord here. We can add new fields, right? We can add like date fields or option selections. We can change the number of days you have to respond if you have multiple responses. We can change the, like this is the prompt that AI is given to actually summarize the responses. And so we could D20 style, this is very like inspired by D20. So summarize pros and cons briefly in Shakespearean. This is something that Sentinel really built in D20, which it's always stuck in my mind. And then you can change really anything else. You can change the threshold. So it's like, hey, a 1-vote veto was like probably that's maybe a little bit too low. Let's make this 2 and you can make it a 3-vote approval. Alternatively, you can say, no, we're gonna make this a majority vote, right? Or 2/3 vote. We're gonna make it so AI decides, right? So we're gonna say choose the option with the most transparency, right? And you can collaboratively own how you prompt that. So I'm just gonna reset this. So let's do a very simple version of this. And let's change the threshold to 3 and 2. Um, Another thing you could do here, just one side note, is you could add a default result as well, right? So kind of optimistic governance style. If there is no decision, a certain kind of certain option will be chosen every time. All right. So change voting threshold for approving proposal. All right. So this is going to create a proposal, because remember, like approving and evolving the flow is itself a flow. Oh, so it was vetoed. Wow. Controversial. Okay. All right, I see you. Um, cool. Okay. So yeah, we voted in here, transparently know the deal. We're not going to change the voting thresholds. Wow. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of different more flows. And so part of the inspiration of eyes was actually Nathan Schneider's modular politics paper, and a few things came out of that policy kit, for example, which you guys are likely all familiar with, came out of that paper. And so we can do things that are much closer to kind of like this modular politics vision as well. And so let's do the simplest possible example of that, and let's add kind of Airtable or Telegram permissions to accessing an Airtable library. And so we're going to take the same demo Telegram group and um, we are going to add a resource to a curated Airtable library, right? So let's trigger this flow. And so get my link. So let's do add Friston article to Metagov library. And then we'll do, oh, and then cool. So the way we've configured this is that there's a trigger, and anyone who has this Telegram group can trigger it. And then it adds the resource. There's no deliberative process, right? So what we've essentially done is add kind of Telegram group gating onto changing this Airtable. So if we move into, yeah, exactly. If we move into Pipestream or into we can see that we've added this new resource. So this is a super simple example of this. Um, but it's a proof of concept to show that you can really add this collaborative layer. And just right now, it's all via webhook. You can really modify any kind of other tool, right? And so that could be a Blue Sky feed. That could be changing Discord admin permissions, creating a Google Calendar invite. Let's actually show a little bit more of a complex example here. How are we doing on time? I'll show that. I'll just kind of walk through this example. We won't go through it. Where is this? So this is what I built for the hats community, and this is hats gated, which is a kind of NFT. There's a trigger. We collect ideas on an agenda item and times that work best for people and synthesize that with AI. We then do a ranked vote on the preferred agenda items and the times that work for people. And then we create a calendar invite with Google Calendar, right? And so these can become fairly sophisticated and really to be anything you want. And so I hope this is the last example I'll show, just to show that like really anything you can imagine, you can model with an eyes process. And the idea of eyes is that, right now it's fairly simple. It's just me working on it. But this will be a plugin ecosystem, right? So you can have a GitHub repo that's your quadratic voting module, and you can plug that into eyes. You can plug in, there'll be like integrations with whatever tool you might use, whether that be maybe it'll be Polis, maybe it will be Google Calendar, whatever, right? So I'll pause there and we can just open up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Ty. Yeah, we definitely had some questions coming in. Um, starting with starting with Steve and Artem have a little back and forth here. Yeah, dumping all messages into a commonly used channel and then prioritizing seems essential. And Artem replies, or maybe creating multiple small deliberation spaces and rooms. Um,
I'm not fully sure I understand. Steve, would you mind clarifying that a little bit?
I'm saying that you can use this to dump everything into one channel like you're doing here in Telegram. And therefore, when you do that, how is it being prioritized? There should be a prioritizing agent in between the messages and what it dumps next to the Telegram. So in other words, it should create some sort of buffer where it takes the incoming stuff, but then decides what to feed to you based upon your current priorities or work mode or whatever you're in. So it can kind of queue things up and then dump things out as would be appropriate, based upon if you just flip, put your status to whatever it is within the system, and it delivers things based upon that status.
Yeah. Yes, and that's actually is how it works. I want to touch back on that in a second, but I think Arlen may have had even a reply to that. You want to, Arlen?
You want me to comment on Steve's
Oh, well, you guys just went back and forth in the
statement?
channel, so I thought that you might have had a reply.
Well, I raised my hand to ask you something else.
Okay, cool.
If that's
Well,
what you need.
Steve, I can actually touch on that, which is there's like really two levels. So eyes is again, it's about how you use your attention, right? And it's how you use your individual attention, and it's how you use your collective attention. And so let's actually go into eyes again, because I want to kind of make that distinction more clear. So how a group uses their collective attention. And so now we're in the demo group. That is all about through the flows that we call it watching. It's essentially subscribing to a flow, right? So groups can subscribe to flows that they want to pay attention to. But it's not everything. It's like the group collectively decides what they actually want to look at. And how that's determined, what the group looks at, happens through flows. Like everything else in eyes, it's all flows. And so call edit the watch flows of the group. And so this one is very simple. There's no deliberative process. Anyone who's in the group can basically add the flows that this group, or change the flows that this group subscribes to. So it's like, hey, are we sure this notification is a good use of our time and attention? And so the group can fully change that as they please. And so in this case, the only flows that they're going to get notifications about are these ones. And everything that's in the activity is from those flows, right? But there's a second level of this, which is how you use your individual attention. And if we go back to home, you could see what you could filter this watched by me or my groups, or just watched by me, right? And these are the flows that I've chosen to pay attention to myself. So these are the flows I've created or replied to, or the ones I've just said like, hey, I just want to look at this, like what's going on. And these are the other flows that I'm watching, right? And this is like the watch and stop watching toggle. And so the idea of eyes is that like in the future, you'll be able to choose not just what you're paying attention to, but where you pay attention to it. So maybe you're like, hey, I'm an SMS person. I don't want to open my computer at all if I can help it. Send me a text message with anything I need to reply to, and you'll be able to do that. Or maybe it's email or your Discord, your Telegram, whatever.
Right.
Cool. Arlen?
Okay. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. I'm also building a tool as part of the interoperable deliberative tools cohort, like Tyler. And this is not the first time I'm watching the demo of Eyes. I'm very impressed with Eyes. I think it's a very elegant product, and I really admire it. My question is, do you think it's possible to implement something like sociocracy using Eyes, or it's out of scope for you guys? Oh, sorry, I know that it's like only you at the moment, but still, like, is it out of scope for you or not?
Can you give me a brief reminder about sociocracy, how that works?
Right. So, I'm using it as an example of a like a sophisticated governance methodology that consists of many different patterns. You could also think of agile, for instance. I think agile is a similar thing. So
Yeah.
do you think it's possible to implement something like this with eyes, or maybe you would want to be like a more like abstract governance layer or high level governance layer, and you would prefer to rely on the other tools that you would connect as modules to implement something?
So yes and yes. So actually
Mhm.
the initial idea of eyes was like kind of just observing in Metagov and also Web3 spaces where everyone is like, okay, I have this special idea for like a governance methodology, right? And like I'm gonna build a whole platform around this thing. Whereas like then you like use it and you're like, oh man, this is actually like not quite hitting in a very specific way for me. Like there's like certain things about my workflow or how we need to work together that this doesn't do. And I feel like I'm missing something. And so I love the idea of eyes was like, how do we make it so that you can model really any kind of governance system, or you can fork a governance system and just start doing your own thing, right? And so yes, agile, 100%. Like that was actually a big thing I was thinking about as I was building this, like how would I build agile rituals directly within eyes. And there's like some things missing from eyes to make that really like hit well right now, but that's definitely the vision. Sociocracy, I kind of forget the details of how that works. But yes, like the vision is that any kind of governance system or coordination mechanism you can model in eyes because it's a generic language. Parts of
So,
that aren't really, I'm sorry, was that?
no, sorry, go on.
Okay. So parts of that, there's additional things that need to be built in eyes for that to really be like slick and a good experience. And like certain kinds of like deliberative processes that still need to be built, but that's definitely the goal. To your second point, it's like there's might be additional UI layers that you might add for specific kinds of like totalizing governance systems, right? So like Agile has it's not just one flow, it's multiple flows that all interrelate to each other. Similar with even like managing a blue sky feed, that's not just one flow, that's actually multiple flows. One's about moderating individual posts, one's about adding an account to be followed in that feed. And so instead you might have a way of collecting those flows together into like a holistic view and displaying it in a special way. Um, but to your final point is like you can also use eyes as an infrastructure layer. And so the idea is that eyes will be something that you just kind of just white label. It's like, hey, no, this is actually just infrastructure. It's an open source language for defining process. Like integrate it within whatever your tool set you use. Eyes provides all this other infrastructure for plugging into Discord and Telegram and whatever be helpful for you, but like show it in your UI. Like if you don't want people to go into to eyes, totally fine. And that's definitely the goal. It's not where we're at now, but that's where we're heading.
Mm-hmm. I'm asking because what we are trying to build right now is basically a tool for like running specific like workshops asynchronously, like a retrospective, right? And I'm wondering if like you would want to implement retrospective as one of eyes flows, or maybe we could connect our tool to eyes so that we would do the retrospective and then it would send the results of the retrospectives back into your flow.
Both and, right? So there's a version of
Mm-hmm.
retrospectives that you can do right now with eyes, and it's like simple, but I think there's special ways you might do that UI and that user experience where you'd want like a plugin like Harmonica.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I really want to integrate with eyes, so I hope we can discuss it
Cool.
later.
No, me too. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's definitely a bigger conversation, but I would love that as well.
Yeah.
I think Rick was next.
Yeah, Tano, no, I get the gist and the spirit of it. And I put several questions in there, but rather than asking the specific questions, have you written sort of like an executive summary of the current capabilities and functions of it and what the future features you're aiming for? Because I can see so much potential. And it's like having a master curator that's both collective and individual, so that if you have a
Yeah.
interest and you're trying to, capture the zeitgeist of a lot of messages and whatever, I just see so much potential in terms of sense making. The other thing you mentioned is sense making tools. I don't know whether you have very different, you know, what do you mean by sense making tools, and are there different sense making tools that you're using? But if you haven't already done one, I would be happy, and I'm sure other people would, to read such a document, because I think it's got so much potential. But I appreciate your innovation. Last thing, there is somebody who I know, and if you give me an executive summary, I can send it to somebody who's the CTO of a of an exponential organization, who has, you know, entrepreneur for whatever, and he's always looking out for new cool things in IT. And you know, I could send it to him, run it by him, and say, "What do you think?" You know, and because
Yeah.
you need more support to do this work.
Yes. Um, yeah. Okay. So a couple things. I'll definitely do that, and thank you for that offer. I really appreciate it. Um, I'm forgetting, not tracking all the points you said, so let me know if I missed something. But you mentioned, yeah, I need more support, and like this is actually like a big conversation about this, which is like, how do you bring contributors onto this? What's the financial model of it? Right now, this is structured as a C corp, right? And the goal is to open source like the language of eyes, but it's just me right now. I don't have the ability to do that by myself. Um, and so there's a big open question about like what's the legal financial structure, and I'm actually open to a lot of ways of doing this. But it's kind of uncharted territory in a lot of ways, especially like platform co-ops, which I would love to do. Super legally, financially questionable how you pull that off. There's very few examples. And so if you guys know anyone who is interested both technically in building this, as like an engineer, but also who are interested in like novel kind of like legal and financial mechanisms for, incentivizing a broader community and making this a sustainable project, let me know.
Well, actually, I just came from exponential organizational mastermind group just prior to this, and maybe we should connect, and I can share some information. You might want to join. It's a bit pricey, but you know, it's connecting with people who've been around the block, who know how to scale things. If you don't know about exponential organization, you may want to just Google that and look at it and see whether that fits into your, you know. But you need a lot of help to get this. I mean, it's a great idea. Great idea. So I
Yes.
applaud you for your innovation.
So I appreciate it. Cool. Rosalind, I think your hand was up.
I think Val's in stack ahead of me.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, well, Liz was next, and Liz was asking just about let me find it. She said that because it's deployed in trusted community context, there's no need to build any resistance to abuse. Wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, it's actually the goal of eyes is that like it's kind of up to you how you build a resistance for abuse. And so there might be contexts where like you like, hey, this is fine. Anyone can say whatever. We're all friends here. Other times where you want to dial that up a little bit or dial it up a lot. The way that you might do that right now is that you through two ways. One is that you can set permissions for pretty much every aspect of eyes, right? And so you might choose as having trigger or respond permission something that has like Sybil resistance, for example, like an Ethereum NFT or something, or a set of Ethereum addresses. Um, Another thing you can do is that it's not a lot of the kind of how you make a flow really secure and hard is about how you change how that flow evolves, right? And so you can say, um, maybe this bigger group can participate in a flow, but a smaller group can actually be responsible for changing that flow. And so you can really build this in whatever way you want, whatever level of security feels good for you.
Cool. Yeah, that kind of gets to my question, which was like, I feel like the starting point, like where you're at in the groups you're working with, like you're kind of creating a starting point for groups, and it can come out of like a group of like a founding community and the processes that they kind of want to like put into eyes off the jump. But then like after you kind of help them set up a few of these processes, like those processes can evolve. Um, right? And like anyone can kind of change those things over time. So yeah, I guess I was just curious about if you kind of see it that way. Like, is there a sort of one-on-one like consult kind of group emergent process for setting up the processes that first get embedded into eyes, and then it kind of is like free for like a free for all, not totally, but like things can
It's a free for all the entire time. And
fall.
what I mean by that is that like it's meant to be bottoms up emergent. So like anyone can create a flow about anything. And what determines whether that flow has buy-in validity is whether people use it. Specifically whether a group watches that flow and decides to subscribe to it. Right. So like I can create a flow for Metagov, how we elect the board of Metagov. And it's like has no validity because no one's using it or like paying attention to it. But if Liz creates that flow and like gets people to use it, it's a different story. And so there is no gating on how you create a flow. It's just whether you get people to use it or not.
Interesting. Cool. All right, one more quick question. Rosalind, go for it.
Yeah, thanks. And I might follow up in an email or something because I want to go deep on some points and stuff. But I'm wondering, jumping off of what Val was talking about, if there was like flow. I saw you have flow templates. I don't know if that's something that goes from group to group. And if so, if eventually you're going to build out maybe not just single flows as templates, but like flow packages that allow you to like import a certain set of tools. And that way they can talk to each other. And connected to this, I saw how we trigger flows that are already built
Yeah.
from inside of like a particular application. But I'm curious, can you build flows or edit flows from within an application? Because that's just a flow itself. So I'm wondering if those specifically need to be pre-built. So that way, like I just load this into my Slack and Discord and Telegram, and then I can edit and design flows from those platforms without having to go to eyes. I'm just thinking about it from a UX standpoint.
The nomenclature is like a little bit confusing. I'm still working on it. A flow template is just a reusable process. It's just like a reusable process that you can keep triggering over and over again, right? And so that's when I say flow, I'm really talking about these flow templates. But the idea is that you can fork those. I mean, I haven't built that feature yet, but like it's trivial to be able to like fork that template and be like, hey, I want to take Metagov's template here and use it for my own organization and just change a couple things. Because it's all just config at the end of the day. It's like a CI/CD config. But then to your other point, yes, having bundle packages, like we were talking about before, of like having your agile package or having a moderate a blue sky feed package. Like you'll have a bunch of packages like that in that same way. And then you had another point. Oh, editing a flow within another application. Yes, just more difficult because there's like a ton of validation on like how you set a valid flow. And so it's like a question about how you make it so anyone could, but maybe it's like a widget or something that you can embed into another application. I'm not sure. Maybe it's like an open source repo to have those UI elements and that validation. But yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
But do we have to script stuff to make our own flows now, or what?
Oh, it's just like a flow builder, and so I'll just show one last thing before we drop off.
Make it quick.
Oh, sorry. Oops. So it's easy to make a new flow. You just kind of click here, be like, hey, I want to decide. Yes, reusable template. Anyone can participate. What should we do? Yes. This is like an easy flow builder. And then it spits out this config essentially. So it's all in the UI right now. You're not creating like custom config. And you can kind of change every aspect of this. You can add a new collaborative step. You can trigger a webhook at the end of it. Really anything you might want to do here.
Super cool. I say we play more, and let's set up a community call for sometime in the next couple weeks. I will message you, and yeah, it's super, super awesome. So thank you so much, Ty, for sharing with all of us. Thank you all for coming. If you didn't get to ask your question, come to the Metagov Seminar Slack channel, and we can continue discussions there. And yeah, let's keep playing with these tools and set up another time to do that. So with that, we'll give everyone the rest of their days. Go off, be
Holler at
inspired.
my boy. Come on. Woo!
Our boy, Ty. Everyone, give Ty a
Tyler,
round of applause. Thank you. Thank you.
Tyler, I just
Thank you guys.
Taylor, I put my
Bye,
phone number
everyone.
in the chat.
I saw that, Rick. Thank you. And yeah, I appreciate all the feedback and time. And yeah, so lovely seeing all you guys.
Thanks, Ty. Bye, everyone.